welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Sean Swetnam again. We have previously recorded; those will be sort of clipped and YouTube. Um, there was something that happened with the audio, but Sean was nice enough to come back on and run us through the program at UCLA again. But before we get ahead, if you just let us know who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are. Have you ever wondered how I'm able to run my business, my podcast, and still be able to coach? Well, I use TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is an all in one coaching software that reduces the amount of time that we spend on the back end of programming, on our Google Sheets, on our Excels, and allows me more freedom to do testing. With this podcast and episodes, I'm actually able to run some programs that I learned through different coaches coming on. To find out how you can use TeamBuildr and how it can apply to your own program, visit the link in the description and catch yourself a 30-day free trial. Just simply use code PACHOCUP, that's PACHALQUP, and start the next stage of your coaching career.
Me on again so we can clarify what we went through, and hopefully this one goes smoothly, right? So I work with UCLA Football. I primarily work with the specs, which would be our kickers, punters, snappers, of course. I also assist Coach Hicks with RTP, and then I do a bunch of other stuff and kind of swing around and coach other guys as well. So whatever is needed, I'm kind of like with the swing man in that regard. So Coach Corey Miller is our director. Our scientist that I share an office with, obviously, here is Coach Johnny Brasher. He's the man. He's our Tony Stark. And Coach Tesso is our associate that came aboard the last couple months. He's been terrific. So really happy to be here and really excited to go over everything again.
Perfect. I do want to start the team. It's something that we didn't highlight that much of, and I kind of want to touch on a little bit more because the best programs I found, and I've spoke with like the UF, a number of different departments there, and like their team runs so smoothly because everyone's so connected to each other and they're so willing to share what's going on. I kind of know a little bit of the background on what happens player wise, but if you talk about like the skills and how that communication is so important for you and so far.
Yeah, the integration is huge for us. It's the biggest component in driving what we have for our culture, our Drake culture, which is one of the biggest things is just clarity and driving everything. So whether that's the same tools everyone uses, right? So like team, depending on what's going on with their VBT or how they collect their values and outputs, we use Vauld, their whole suite with the force frame, force decks, as well as the dynamometer and the Nordboard, of course. All of that stuff is aggregated right now into our AMS. We use Power BI as well as Smartabase, and we're looking into integrating it, Coach Brasher, of course, into just one hub, one central location that the guys have access to, of course. So they can go on their phone, they can see what they did that day, what their player load was on Catapult, their top speed. We mentioned there are heat checks and things of that nature, and where they're at in regards to making sure that they're on the basis for the whole week, so that when practice comes, now that we're in spring ball and our Friday night lights and then our showcase comes out, they're ready to go, and they're ready when they put their full pads on that, it's go time. So one of the skills that we have in particular is setting everything up throughout the week, where we have our lifts as well as our testing protocols built into lifts set up through the week. So everyone knows what's going on. Everyone knows that as soon as we're done, they take their pads off, they put their shoes on after they take their cleats off and their spats and their ankle tape. They come in on Monday and they do their Nordboard testing. Whether that is out of season, where we use our standard just Nordic setup on that, or now where we're football specific, that time of year, we're not trying to get into a full Nordic, of course, right? So we go into a isoprone setup. So we're long lever. That's been really, really helpful for us to make sure that we're still hitting the hand with regard to where they're at, their asymmetry, their power output, their torque, of course, and all the values that Vault gives us. Also that longitudinal tracking of where they were, where they are now, and where we predict them to be based off the player loads, as well as the total yardage and high-speed yardage based off of what they did last year around these times. Inside of that, there's other things we can layer in that's position specific with each coach that's designated to those groups. But the main idea here is like there's clarity and everybody knows what's going on. Moving forward out of that, we have our CMJ jump that we do after our second practice, our drop jump that we do after our third practice later in the week. And then we just added that infrared thermography with thermohuman that we touched on last time as well.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of tools that are in there. And there's a lot of ideas of like the guys know what's going on and they can look at their data and see where they're at, and they can start to have higher level, higher order conversations about, hey man, uh, I hit 19 miles an hour today on this yellow day or this green day based off where they are, and they know the verbiage of everything, and they can start to talk shit a little bit to each other, and they can start to compete a little bit, and they can start to build that culture of, hey, next time out, this is what's going to happen, this, that, and the other. So that's very exciting for us to hear, those conversations happen. But contextually, they're also starting to get better and more refined and more polished. So it turns out, hey, you ran 19 miles an hour, man, but you only ran, three, 300 yards of high speed running, 75% or over. You weren't really getting after it today. What are you talking about, right? So you might have hit you know, later in the week. What we do, depending on where the guys are, we want to put hurdles out, not hurdles per se, but wickets rather. The smaller hurdles, 6-inch ones, we lay them flat based off the guy's size. And after the warm up, they hit a wicket. We try and get a 90% sprint or above every week to maintain that speed. And make sure that we have our high speed running set up. So we're inoculating the hamstrings, of course. They're in their pads. We want to make sure that they're running fast and they hit it at least once a week so that we can retain that quality, at least 7 to 10 days. We prefer 7 days or under. So we really add wickets to one of those practices strategically, depending on where we are. The last time we did it was a little bit later in the week. But it works out really well. And everyone that did hit their 90, which was over a third of the team, hit it during that period based off of what Coach Basher had with the catapult. We had one guy hit it in one of the drills afterwards. I think one of the competition drills. It
Yeah,
was
so
seven
it's
all.
still within the range that close enough to when you wanted them to hit it.
Right, right. And we had, over 60 guys PR, out of the off season going into spring ball. So with how everyone's trending upwards, of course, life is good. Like we would like them, to get stronger and faster and continue those. But at a certain point, there's where we're at right now in terms of total value, and we bring the body weight stuff into that too, and the biometrics, of course. But the decrement of what they're losing in terms of strength and speed, just as the two overarching themes. We want that decrement to be very slow and gradual and controlled, as opposed to making it something that is steep and you know really really lost quickly. So that helps us with our physicality when we're trying to practice and we're learning tackling and relearning a lot of those values as well. But the other side of it is like, man, we just want to have fun and go fast and be strong. So we want to throw
Mm.
around some weight when we get done with the practice. We actually have some guys that are um, more excited this year than they were last year after practice to come in and actually lift weights and move stuff because they have an idea of like what's going on. They have an idea of like where they are with their strength.
Yeah, and how, like, I'm guessing how that impacts their playing as well.
Mhm.
Um, Last time I kind of wanted to dive into a little bit um more, but obviously most coaches have heard about wickets and how to set them up and what to do. How how do you set it up for football specific when they are in their gear?
Yeah, we keep it very simple. We were using, I don't want to get out specific distances because everyone has their own, stuff that
Mm,
they're privy to. But we have like a small, medium, large is what we say.
okay.
We don't really, and that's in terms of distance between each wicket. We don't really use the large sizing that we have just because guys are not opening up. Those are guys that run consistently over 20 miles an hour. And we do have a good bolus of those guys. The idea behind that too is like, we want them opening up? Do we want them
Mm,
focusing more on their acceleration based off where the wickets are, the distance of the total amount of wickets, right? Um, and then we've been using our medium setup, but when we have pads on with our bigger guys, our O line, our D line, even some of our OLBs, like we want to make sure that they're in a little bit more constrained because they'll be a little more upright. Some of these guys have knee pads, or sorry, not knee pads, but knee
shoulder
braces on.
pads. Okay.
Yeah, so we don't want them, catching their knee braces, of course, too. So, um, with that, even with pads on, they're still hitting the numbers that are 90 and above with that extra weight. And I know Charlie Francis said like 80% is, usually where we see, top end speed, um, of a translation of body weight to using pads. Well, the bigger guys, we don't use 90%. It's either an 85 or an 80, depending on where we are in the year as well, to
Mhm.
make sure because, we got 300, 15, 317 pound guys running 18, one or two guys running 19 right now, or almost 19 for another guy. So It's very constrained in terms of, hey, like we want to hit one of these. It's less than 5 minutes, so we're not taking away from the coaches because it's football time.
I think that's something else that I kind of wanted to touch on is you're obviously hitting very specific percentages of speed. How often are you doing that on the off season compared to in season?
Yeah, we're hitting our speeds at least once a week now. Organically, if a guy hits 90% more than once a week, that's great. Contextually, based off of where they were, their yardage, like I mentioned before, their high speed running yardage as well, like player load and what their position specific is. Like we want to make sure that we're not overcooking them as well,
Mm,
right? So during the off season, we're still trying to hit 90 once a week, but it's more prevalent, and we have way more time to spend with our wickets or our just acceleration into trying to build up into a 90. So we give them a long runway for that. We also give them time to kind of like set up where they can either go into a 2 point start or they can kind of do like a more locomotive start where if they want to do kind of skipping motion or some kind of motion where they're not really knee driving yet. So they have a little momentum before they go into an acceleration. So they're not going from 0 to 100 as soon as possible.
mm.
They kind of float into it. A lot of guys like that, depending on where they're at. A lot of the skill guys like that, and some of the QBs like more of a 2 point start because they're kind of in that stagger position usually. And then our bigs, they like to just race each other because they're just those kind of guys, right?
Yeah, just gritty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, with something that you touched on before, and it's that exposure to Nordics. Obviously, the the full Nordic is more. Um, there's more DOMs involved with it. Is that something that you strongly consider when you start moving into that in season and the sort of reducing the range or the intensity of them to make sure that they're still getting that stimulus, but not detrimental enough that they'll have DOMs for the next sessions coming up or games.
Yeah, we would layer in the off season our Nordic, our short lever position into more partner assisted Nordics,
Mm,
where they're holding on to the ankles, of course, and going. I mean, you can call it a Russian. Back when I was training in high school, it was a Russian lean. Now it's a Nordic. I don't, it is what it is, right? So, um, the guys hate them, right? Because they feel like their hamstrings are turning into pulled pork, right? And they
mhm,
feel like they're getting shredded, right? And then once they walk away, they feel great, right? But what we're also concerned with is we're pushing heavy prowlers, we're towing more weights. We're going to be utilizing the run rockets now that we have an ample quantity of them moving on in the future. What's not taken into account, I think, in some practices, but we've done a really good job of this, is the strain that it also puts on the calves and the lower limb, not just the
mhm,
hamstrings, just because they're really trying to rip those handles out of the Nord board. And a lot of guys will say, "Hey, man, I'm feeling that in my calves, right?" I'm like, okay, I'm kind of curious about that. Is that something where it feels like it's straining, or is it no? It's just like a little pull. Is that more like an Achilles, or it's like gastroc, or where we at? No, it's just like a tense, like I'm using it, right? So with that in mind, depending on the guy's leverages, where some guys might have longer femurs or shorter femurs or longer fib tips, um, the concern there is like we're also pushing heavy prowlers, which could be and doing heavier sprints
mm,
in contrast or chain sprints as well. Contrast with free sprints, aka body weight sprints, good old fashioned sprints, right? So that concern is like, hey, let's not put too much on them with that regard. So depending on where we're at in the week, right, and all of these answers are contextually driven, where it depends is always the best answer.
yep,
We want to make sure that we're again inoculating the hamstrings, making sure we have plenty of tissue quality, um, but nothing prepares the hamstrings for sprinting and high speed running like the aforementioned high speed running and sprinting. Right.
yep,
So if that's the formula, then like, hey, that's where the main thing is the main thing, and let's keep it there, and let's not get too complicated with it. Um, so when we move into more football specific season type stuff like spring ball, going into fall camp, going into the season, of course, especially for guys that are kicking, doing kickoffs, punts, as well as field goals, there's a lot of hamstring involvement, whether that's, depending on if they kick with their right leg, let's say, they're going to plant with their left leg a lot. So there's a lot of like glute med as well as, ankle stability there, depending if they're punting or kicking, as well as just the hamstring on the kicking side that, rips through. And if they're more of a guy like we have with our field goal kicks and our kickoffs who swipes a little bit more across his body, or if it's more linear like our punter,
mm,
there's different hamstring, at high speed stuff going on. So we change that on my end to where the RDLs are kind of out because that heavy hamstring stuff puts a lot of pressure on their back and their pelvis. is almost like
Yep.
it's similar to like a pitching where there's a lead block leg in pitching, even though they're going down, starting on 10 inches and going down a grade. They're running into this, on a kickoff, or they're taking a few hard steps into it for a field goal or a punt. So there's a lot of build up going and speed going into this one kick that involves maximal limb speed. And although they're not getting into a hip flexing position like they would in a sprint where the knee is up, we switched that where we're going iso prone on the Nord board, so laying flat, 180 parallel with the ground and pulling as hard as they can. And the numbers are pretty similar to what we found with the Nordic, full Nordic position. Um, but what we're getting at is we're going to take away some of that heavier stuff they do, and make it a little more unilateral, where we do some sled walks, some power walks, a la Louis Simmons, at certain weights, at certain times, at certain distances, reverse walks as well, for that knee extension and quad and ankle complex. But a lot of it is also going to be tantrums, whether that's bands or like a Swiss
Mm.
ball, like one of those bigger, balls.
Yeah.
There's like 50 names for those, right? So we just call them Swiss balls, Pilates balls,
Yeah.
or yoga balls,
Yeah.
right?
Swiss balls. A lot
Yeah,
of people call them physio balls, but it's a Swiss ball.
yeah. And what we're looking for those is a certain amount of reps within a certain amount of time. If I'm getting 30 seconds of work, I want to get about 60 reps, so like 2 a second. That's a longer duration. If I'm working for about 10 seconds,
Mhm.
I would like to get 25 plus on those. And that's not, a crazy amount of kicks when I'm in a short lever position, sitting on a bench and the ball is underneath me and I'm doing my tantrums. But the hamstring activation there is really fantastic for those guys, and they really like it. It is taxing, but once they're done with it, they're not sore. Delayed onset muscle soreness is not an issue with them, but they do feel activated and
Mhm.
they do feel primed. Um, the one thing I will mention with that is that does not take into account high speed limb length like sprinting does. It's not even close. They're super slow compared to sprinting, right?
Yeah.
So that's not something that we use. We're like, hey, we're like, this is going to resemble or mock the speed of sprinting. I make that
It's
very,
more for
very
like a pop type deal where they're activating and they're stimulating that
yeah.
nerve reaction.
Correcto. And a lot of it is just like it makes the guys feel good, right?
Yeah.
And we can go into the CNS and things of that nature and the use stress of it, but they just feel good doing it. So when they do their jumps the next day, they feel primed still and they feel pretty good going into the next week. To the point where we would like to set something up, me thinking competition wise of what the guys are doing and leaning into more of that kind of activation and movement quality stuff to prep the tissue and get their central nervous system, get as many birds with one stone as we can going into competition.
And I think as well, when people are talking about like tantrums and all that stuff, some people are like, yeah, that's fluff, it's hoo ha. But like, if it makes the athletes feel good,
There's
so
some
what?
coordination, yeah, exactly, and there's some coordination involved with it that I think it's important.
No, I agree. And uh,
Just being able to
I
fire,
always get, yeah, I always get stuck with that. Um, Coaches hate a lot of things because they're focused on their minutia, and it's like, let's be generalists. Let's fucking
yeah.
throw everything at the wall, see if it works. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, there's
Mhm.
plenty of other things we can do.
Right. It's not everyone's wrong and I'm right. And watch this. The other thing that
Mm,
we switched up is going into more banded pitch shark work, belt squat work, like very,
mm,
very, very heavy bands, like majority of the weight banded, to get more of a faster eccentric and less reversal
mm.
time for them. The bands,
What
of course, we
exercises do you usually focus on that?
just a bilateral, just a
Okay.
squat, and that'll eventually translate into a speed squat where they're doing something like it
Mm,
would resemble a pin squat. One, because of the curvature of their backs when they're kicking and how much compression they already have when they're doing multiple kicks and sessions of those per week. I don't really want to put a barbell on their back or even anteriorly or overhead. Overhead, it just doesn't load them correctly, even though we did um, a lot of snatch grip work and behind the neck presses and push presses and things of that nature in the off season. But the bands will pull on that belt, so it's highly uncomfortable for them, and there's a little bit of duress within their mental when
mhm,
they're doing 4 or 5 squats for speed, and we can put the VBT with our gym aware that we have on there as well. But the one thing they notice, like, hey man, this is like really, really pulling on my hips. It's really comfortable. I'm like, great, life is uncomfortable. I deal with it. But then they like, oh, my back feels much better because I'm getting more decompression than I would with just 9 plates on there. Like a pitch shark is I don't know what the ratio is of what the actual weight you put on the belt to what it
mm,
actually feels like. It's like a 4 or 8 to 1. I don't remember, but you can load that thing up, and the guy's like saying they're lifting 700 plus pounds on a pitch shark at weighing 185, 195.
mhm. It's kind of like the leg press ratio.
For sure, for sure. Yeah,
I see a lot of Instagram where like people are just stacking up weights on the leg press, but then they get discussed like that's not the same.
that's the one exercise that freaks me out. That's the one where the knees just go backwards, and there's a
Oh
there's a warning
yes,
on that. Yeah, it's like yeah,
yeah. Um, we also kind of spoke about quite a lot of about sorry this we spoke quite a lot about the asymmetries. Obviously, kickers have big asymmetries because they're one's stable, one's moving at fast rates. And we kind of talked about the 13%, but you actually think it should be less, which I agree with. Do you want to dive into a little bit more about the asymmetries and how you sort of manage them and deal with sort of leveling out?
yeah, for sure. I want to preface that by if I'm seeing something on the Nord board that should be not removed per se, but that's probably I'm probably late to the party. If I'm seeing something on the Nord board, I should know that they're a little bit fried. I should know that there's a little bit of an asymmetry. Watching their gait when they jog out to practice, we have a whole suite set up where they're doing hurdles, mini bands, body tempering, kind of like a body shop before they go into early outs
Hmm.
for practice. So concerning that, I should have an idea or a pulse of where they're already at. So when I see that, and then I watch them kick, and I'm looking at with our snappers ops time, and I'm looking at hang time for our kickers and placement of those kicks and things of that nature. I should already have an inkling or an idea of like, hey, this
Hmm.
guy is a little bit off, or something's up, or is it midterms? Is it finals time? Like where are we at with the schedule, right? Um, so when I do see a Nord board, or I do see a CMJ or a drop jump, or any of the other testing that we do, and I see those values, and I can look at where they're at over time and where they have been within similar weeks or similar days of those training schedules, I should know already. Hey, man, this is like there's an asymmetry here. It's this much. You've had this much last time when we were 3 weeks into training camps. That's totally normal. But we made these adjustments looking at the actual programming, and you were fine. And or hey, we want you to be taxed right now. We want your nose to be sniffling a little bit. I love that Cal Dietz quote that I think I mentioned last time of if you're not training your guys hard enough, if they're not a little bit distressed, sniffling in the nose, a little bit of a call for a tickle in their throat, you're not training them hard enough by the end of the semester or quarter. So yeah, the asymmetry is interesting because it's like I should already know that, but I want to know how much now. Now I can actually statistically quantify it, and from there I can have an action plan of is there some cattywampus? Is one hip height higher than the other one? There's a whole response plan based off of what we already have, and we do again in terms of skill and layering integration. Um, we have interventions based off of those things that the guys know that they need to do. Do I need to hang upside down, a la Donnie Thompson, um, and reset my hips? Do I need to go down to the training room and actually get some soft tissue work done? Do I need to do some psoas smashing and make sure that I have some good quality in that pelvic bowl? Or am I just a little bit tired and a little bit fried, and I'm just a little bit not neurally able to push into that handle with that ankle that I'm, able to? That's where that match day plus one comes in, or
Hmm.
the practices that we're getting the scans from the thermohuman, where it's like these are our hot spots. This is where you're at. It makes sense that you're not, this is a little bit cooler, so that looks like that area is more neurologically fatigued based off of like your quad right now is a little more hot, and that temp is clicking and showing us, hey man, that uptick in your temperature based off of your normative scans shows us that you're muscularly fatigued, and you either need to go get your cryotherapy done, you need to do your float tank at our spot that we have, you need to go downstairs. We have all these interventions in this whole chart of like what needs to happen based off of where they're at, and that could even go into we need to program and make sure that we are periodizing how we're recording and utilizing the tools of recovery. Those modalities are important too because we can't do cryotherapy all year long, because at a certain point the guys, if they're not adapting to it, then yeah, we should, but it depends on what's going on. So I think we mentioned tachyphylaxis last time, and just like the drug or the dosage of what we give them is losing its intended effect. I think that's highly
Hmm.
important, and utilizing recovery where here's an exercise or here's a mobility movement or here is some modality and this is how we use it, whether it's a voodoo band like you mentioned before as well. This is what we're doing, this is how you use it, this is the best way to use it for this issue or this derivative malfunction in shape or system. Let's go ahead and layer that now because you're going to need it in about 4 or 5 weeks when we get to our 80-95% going into camp, right? So I can get that on the back end, and they know what's going on, and they know how to do those things, and know how to execute what we're prescribing them. So I don't need to administer it for multiple guys. They already know how to do that, even though they haven't
Mm.
done it in a couple months, right? So we can layer that plasticity in as well in terms of where they're at, where they need to be, and being able to like retrieve information that they've had before. They might need a reminder, hey, the voodoo band is the blackening that you wrap. You know, pull it to 150% of stretch or tension, and then wrap it, and then pull it, and they know how to do it.
One thing that I found really interesting about our last conversation was because you do consider a lot of the player load and some side effects from the workouts, different parts of the team have touch points with your athletes. So, say someone's injured or someone's feeling tight or someone scored, whatever it may be on their player load, if they're green, blue, red, whatever it is, you've got different sort of pieces that touch base, even academics wise. Can you sort of run that through of how that works and how that system is sort of been set up?
Yeah, I mean the first window of opportunity is when they come in, they weigh in for their body weight. So we track that, and every practice day we're also going to do their hydration testing. We have ranges for hydrated, minimally dehydrated, severely dehydrated, and just overboard like red flags, intervention, you know, to the max. Um, if anything pops up, like our heat check that I mentioned before as well, um, to just run over that really quick, high player loads. Um, just when we see anything that is not run of the mill or normal, when we see outliers, we can contextually look at those, and then we can kind of go back and cross check with their testing for that day after practice. What they had the next day, did they have two practices in a row, which was dissimilar from last week as well? Where were we last year, and where was this guy last year? If we had them, if we didn't have them, it's kind of like who is similar and who has a similar player load, who plays on that side within that position, and was that guy here last year? So we can kind of compare those guys. Is this guy getting as many reps as that guy? This guy's actually getting more. So if we're looking at that from last year, and again, Coach Brasher does a tremendous job of this. And when we have our meetings, our high performance meetings with all of our stakeholders, we go over this is what this guy looks like from last year. This guy's taking more reps. He's a transfer. He's a freshman. So the player load is actually probably higher than this. And this is where we're at, right? So you might get a text from your athletic trainer, from your academic advisor, from your position coach, from the head coach, from our chief of staff, from your strength and conditioning coach, and everyone saying, hey, like you're on the hot list. It says you hit a crazy asymmetry on the Nord board today. Academic advisor might say that and be like, hey, like you're on the hot list. Are you still good for our PLF meeting? Are you still going to be able to make it? Are you getting treatment? Are you going to be 5 minutes late? They check in. The trainer might check in with everybody's talking to everybody at the same time, and all the windows are clean and clear. So we can see and kind of move around what's going on. Everyone in the same building is also super helpful because we don't share our Olympic sports within this building. They have the Acosta, which I spent 2 years in also with baseball and water polo part of this. But we have our athletic trainers, our strength and conditioning, our weight room, as well as our practice fields on the same level. And then our offices with the coaches, admin, and everybody else upstairs as well. So everyone is getting, you know, in touch with everyone. We all eat at the same place. It's like we're in our own little like Olympic village, if you will. It's
Mhm.
awesome.
How has that sort of manifested itself in their athletes' performance? Like having a coaching staff that has everything so clear and concise with each other.
Yeah, because everything's so clear and concise, they know that what is happening and what will happen uh, within the transparency window. They know what's going on, so there's no excuses. There's no hiding. There's no corners to kind of blend into. They know based on what's going on. You know, again, discipline, respect, and enthusiasm. They know they must be disciplined. They must get their sleep. They must hydrate, or they're going to get a text from their coach saying, "Hey, your hydration test was over this number. You're severely dehydrated. You need a drip drop, and I need to see you with two waters in this meeting, one for when you're in the meeting and one right before you go to practice, right? So there's all kinds of communication. And our coaches are very savvy and aligned with us as well, which has been an awesome experience. So we know that if we're giving them feedback, the coaches are very serious about seeing their guys do awesome as well. So it's a lot of
Mm.
fun being able to collaborate and team up with them. Some of the guys that are new sometimes or not used to this much collaboration between coaches and stakeholders kind of have a little bit of a rough time for the first, you know,
Mhm.
little bit, a couple 10 days. There's a little bit of a culture shock if you're coming from high school or a place where the culture wasn't as succinct as it is here. There's they don't get in trouble per se. There's no really bad kids, right? It's more of the guys understand that okay, I'm of age, I'm a man, I need to be able to take care of my own self. I ran this speed yesterday. I need to get better. I lifted this amount of weight. I did this, and all of their stuff is blatantly clear for them. If there's any questions and clarity, um, they know exactly where to go. They can ask
Mm.
anybody in the room on any level what's going on, and everybody will be plugged in and they'll know. It actually makes it easier for us to integrate guys into the culture that are again transfers or coming freshmen because they understand like, hey, this is what's going on. Go ahead and jump on the bandwagon, go and jump on the party bus, and let's keep it rolling.
You've kind of mentioned it a couple times now, but how is the hydration test being done, and what are some advice that you just give off at the back end of that?
Yeah, so a lot of it is when the report is given or submitted, we have it next to their body weight for that day. So we have yesterday's body weight, this morning's body weight, as well as a hydration score. And then again, we grade that based off of they're hydrated, they're minimally hydrated. Sorry, they're hydrated, they're minimally dehydrated, they're severely dehydrated, uh, or they're way overboard and they're not living right for that. We also have a note section which includes if there's high particulate matter, whether that's salt or whatever else it is. Again, we're speaking about urine, so I don't want to get too graphic with that, of course. We're testing that with a refractometer, um, and we're using a specific gravity to make sure that that number that we have um, is, again, relates to their level of dehydration contextually based off of their weight. So we're not saying, okay, this number is here, so that means you're dehydrated.
Mm.
But coach, I'm up 2 pounds. I drank a gallon of water yesterday. Urine is clear, yada yada yada. But this says I'm dehydrated. What is that? Well, maybe you're not getting enough electrolytes. Maybe you're not getting salt. So the refractometer and the specific gravity here for those units that we're getting are not popping up. So contextually, we can say that hey, keep doing what you're doing. Let's add some electrolytes. You need some salt as well. And maybe we throw you some pickle juice or right stuff if we're too far in the hole, and we get that done before their meetings in the morning because we're a morning practice organization program. So we get that early. So when they're in their meetings at 7:15, I'm already sending the report of this guy's dehydrated and he's two and a
Mm.
half pounds down. This guy's hydrated, but he's 3 pounds down. This guy is dehydrated based off the number, but he's up. And we have conversations based off of those, and again, interventions based off of those, rather. So the coaches get it, everyone gets it. As soon as they're in meetings, they'll get notified. Corey Miller, our director here, also gets notified, and we can have those conversations before they put pads on, before they got to practice. We're already hydrating, we're already getting our electrolytes in. We might need carbohydrates because that's also huge for us as well. A lot of guys will look or feign dehydrated, but we look at their plates when they're eating lunch, and they're not salting their food, or they're not eating
Mm.
enough starchy or complex carbohydrates, and they're eating more, quicker digestible carbohydrates or fruit that don't sit as long. So the carbohydrate, balance is super contextual as well. So we want to make sure that we're not just getting a number off of a refractometer and saying, "Hey, you're dehydrated, man. That's it," because that's just not one. It's not professional. Two, it's not contextual, and three, it doesn't drive education with how we're having a higher order conversation with them as well.
How aware are they now, having sort of gone through these protocols with
Mhm.
hydration? How how quick are they able to pick up themselves? Actually, I need X, Y, Z to actually fuel myself for
Right.
performance.
Um, Hydration as well as food security is huge for us. So in all the rooms, they have water, they have Powerades. They'll have like a little container of drip drops, liquid IV, depending on LMNT, whatever they want, depending on what their flavor choice is. Um, and they have all of that accessible to them. So if there is an alert during a meeting, they'll find out and they'll be able to, as soon as they're out of that meeting, have a conversation of, hey, this is where I'm lacking, this is where I'm at. I need to be drinking multiple bottles or whatever immediately. What we'll also see is guys that will urine test will have a smaller size sample in terms of like not much urine
Mm.
within that sample, so the testing is a little bit harder. Um, but if you're not providing much of a sample, then you're probably dehydrated, right? Color is big for us too, but we do offer beet juice as something that is
Mm.
important to us. And if you've had any experience with beet juice, um, especially your first experience with beet juice after using the bathroom, um, from the front or
It's
the
a
back
scary
end, you if you
thing.
forgot you had beet juice, it'll be a surprise, right? Um, so understanding that is important to, hey, this urine looks darker. That must mean he's dehydrated, right? That's like the usual like charts we have
Mm-hmm.
is color of dehydration. Um, but again, contextually driven, that dark urine might be because this guy had a beet juice before his lift, and he had a beet juice before practice, or he likes coffee and things of that nature, right? Or his vitamins that
Yeah.
we're giving him based off of his blood panel that we did earlier in the year with our nutrition um, staff and our dietitian, Nikki Johnson, who is an absolute beast.
Yeah. So you also do blood tests to check what they're needing for the the best performance that they can get from themselves. What does that sort of entail at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, it's performed at a time closer to physicals. I'm not privy to,
Okay.
it's with a doctor. It's UCLA Health. We get a lot of resources based off of just being in Los Angeles as well as our connection with UCLA Health because we are UCLA, of course. And that might sound redundant, but the entities are important to distinguish based off of dealing with general population and then dealing with an athletic population here that is in Wasserman for football and Acosta for the Olympic sports and Mo Austin for basketball. So understanding where and when they get tested. A lot of it has to do also with like sickle cell testing and making sure that, and again, based off of HIPAA, right? And contextually driven, of course, again, to be redundant on that, they understand what this person needs when they need it. And some people might have a pill that they need to take every day, whether it's vitamin D, whether it's a multivitamin, or they might have weekly setups like a zinc or something that it might be deficient in magnesium. So we really want to make sure that we're understanding where they're at that time, and then making sure with their physical and how much they sweat. We're not really testing sweat, but um, where they're at. Like we had a guy last year that was like always sweating like profusely, and we couldn't figure out what was going on in terms of it wasn't the weather. We started giving him some salt tablets, and it helped out a ton. But you can literally, as he like would jog by from field to field, you could hear his like shoes squeaking and squishing because he was just
Oh,
so overly sweating, and he would hydrate all the time. And um, it didn't affect him negatively at all. It was just gross, right? With some of the guys, like getting physical with them, of course, right? Like that, like getting physical with a guy that's greased up is tough. Um, so that being said, that guy needs more TLC when it comes to attention with salt tablets, magnesium, and then the other electrolytes as well. It's not just always water, right?
it's interesting you spoke about Beatrice. I kind of touched on the last episode that we did. Um, the sort of studies I was involved with at university, and that was we ran Beatrice once, and I completely forgot the next day, and I was like, it was a number two, so I was like,
Ooh,
something ain't right here, but then
I,
I
I found
remembered, I was like, oh,
so apologies. I found out I was very super iron deficient because of beet juice because there's a beeturia component to that where my stool was the same color as the beet juice where I was going to the bathroom and it was all red and and again I forgot that I was taking it um, and I was like whoa there's something going on like with my colon or my stomach my organs. I mean this is scary stuff.
yeah, my fiance was like, "You need a doctor's appointment." I was like, "Wait." Like I've always found hydration and the sort of health side of it quite fascinating because like there's different ways that you can. s- I'll back up a little bit. The driving factor of performance is nutrition, rest, and recovery. Like Coach Mac has this saying where like our job is pretty much just 10% of their daily life. We're essentially just trying to mitigate 90% of the injuries and everything else that's inherent with sport. But in saying that, because hydration is so important, like the nutritionist at UW when I was there, Ali Vanderberg, she jumped on the podcast and said like with athletes being dehydrated, their peripheral vision actually closes in as well. So like for a football player, that's major because like you've got people running in all directions and everywhere. So keeping hydrated and really opening that field of vision can be so beneficial for their safety as well.
It's huge and peripheral vision. I mean just being athletic in any sport is a
Mhm.
dominant trait, right? And just understanding, being able to, multiply that OODA loop over and over again. Like, how are you going to observe when your field of vision is, smaller, and that bandwidth is less than it was before. The hydration component for us is also important for RTP, right? Just tissue quality
Hmm.
overall in general, um, as well as understanding that there's some papers on just hydration quality as well as like concussions and the ease of concussions based off of
Hmm.
like the blood-brain barrier, uh, not having enough like padding in between as well.
Coach Sweat was kind of dying, so we took a little break, but we're back now.
Let's
um,
see.
we also, again, we're not that different in age brackets, but one of the things that I've always spoke with two coaches that have openly discussed voodoo bands, um, or voodoo flossing. Can you sort of break down how you are using it and the importance for the program with that?
Yeah, so we're not able to administer occlusion blood flow restriction per se because downstairs they have it again, UCLA Health, um, and we want to be safe and not, incur any injury or any long lasting effects of blood clotting or just issues with venous return. So downstairs when they do administer BFR occlusion, Katsu training, whatever you want to call it, based off of what your flavor and preference is, we have it set up where they have a number of pressure that they involve, so they can track everything and know where they're at. With the voodoo band specifically, there is some inclusion in that because we are wrapping them pretty tight. We want to make sure that we're wrapping them, in the right area where they need it the most. I think last time I mentioned we might cut a lacrosse ball in half and put that
Hmm.
half of a ball in, so there's like a trigger point going into it as well. No matter what we do, we want to tack down that tissue and then floss it. And this is something that I've done for multiple years and used in multiple settings. Private, the first 10 years of my practice were from 2011 until 21, were probably before I got in collegiate. And I have been working with collegiate and professional athletes prior to this, but not in a one team setting. And everyone loves voodoo bands. Everyone loves the setup of that Kelly Starrett started, and having conversations with him of it was a bike tube, like an inner tube, cut it up, and it
Hmm.
was the setup where it was just enough where we're tacking the tissue down, allowing some sliding and gliding surfaces uh, to regain the elasticity. And the one thing that he would always go over was um, like looking at the hand in terms of like the skin on the hand and how this is normal. But when it's tight, there's not a lot of movement in there. And if we're tacking it down and kind of moving around, we want some plane that's getting not as much of this, depending on where we are and what area. Um, but the guys get immediate relief from it. Like flexion gapping is also huge for us, putting a ball behind the knee or a towel behind the knee, and different things of that nature too. And a lot of like distractions using heavy
Hmm.
bands on different areas. And I mentioned hanging upside down from the pelvis as well. Um, but with the voodoo band specifically, like we want to make sure that when we're manipulating blood per se, we're trying to get nutrients into that area. So we cut off a little bit of that venous return just because it's wrapped tightly, right? Um, we do add some of that like waste removal once we get out of there and it flushes in, and we're making sure that again looking at the hand where we have some kind of capillary return that's quick or slow depending on where we're at, right? You can see the color change in there. I'm trying to get on camera. Um,
Yeah.
if that return is slow, it's probably time to take that deal off and get it moving around a little bit. When we tack that tissue down, when we tack the tissue down and we have them um, constrained in that shape or that position, we want to isolate that area. Let's say we're trying to get after a calf and we're wrapping below the knee. We'll have them move in that area, maybe from the ankle, because there's more mobility there than at the knee. So we kind of isolate that area depending on where they're at. If we wrap the shoulder or a hamstring, we're going to move from the hip. And we want to make sure that not only are we tacking the tissue down, but we're sliding. We take that thing off. They feel this huge blood release going into that area. It's shuttling nutrients into an area that they feel that's affected negatively, but it's also removing waste with that venous return. So it's been great. Everyone really likes it. That's in conjunction with a lot of our isometric exercises that we're using. Again, if you're on the hot list, Coach Tim Hicks that runs our RTP has set up where we do a lot of activation exercises that he's privy to. Um, some just being a hip thrust or a single leg hip thrust, and a lot of different patella specific or knee specific isometrics that he uses as well that are really, really awesome. He crushes it,
Mm.
that are in conjunction with those. So, again, movement's important with that and tacking that tissue down, but also understanding like what happens with the blood and what happens with the actual like sliding surface of the tissue and what we're trying to normalize. based off of like the need of the guy. And are we going into a mobility day when we're doing that, or are we going into practice? We might have guys wrapped up with a thinner or thicker band depending on the area as well.
Mm. That's quite interesting. I've never sort of heard anything more than like your normal contraction exercises mixed in with the voodoo flossing.
Mhm.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah, we want to have a whole suite of things that we can affect, cause positive effects with our guys, as opposed to just having one tool and then just like trying to
Mm.
see, our Coach Miller comes up or uses this analogy where you have an anvil and you have a blacksmith and he's making a sword or he's making something, some coat of armor, whatever, and he has his sledge or his hammer and he's hitting the sword in the same spot with multiple different strokes based off of what they need. That's where we'd like to stay within that mode, as opposed to just having one point and only one type of hammering swing over and
Mm.
over again. Right? If that's a blunt enough analogy.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's like being or dating to explore a little bit further than the usual the usual movements. And I think that's a question that I've been really liking to ask coaches, like within your own personal workouts. Again, I don't know what yous are like, but I always try, like if it works with me, I'll always try and trickle it in with my athletes to see like how they respond to it. So like for you, how important is it to keep active and sort of do your workouts, explore little different principles, and then sort of trickle them into your own programs?
I'm kind of halfway laughing because we have like a kangaroo court slash fine set up for multiple different infractions that our strength staff might have that Coach Miller brought from the Carolina Panthers. Where if we're a little bit moody or something, we get a spicy fine or a caliente fine. If we don't train, like specifically train, not just get a pump, right? If we don't train for 2 days, that's a fine. Elevators are fines. I'm kind of laughing about that. But in terms of my training, um, I'm not an athlete anymore. So a lot of the stuff that I do is not conducive to a lot of what the guys are doing. And there might be some special exercises that I use. And within our program, with our strength department, our football performance specific department, we want to make sure that we have our movements like our cleans, or even being, reductionists, our hip hinges, our squats, our horizontal and vertical pulls, or horizontal and vertical presses. We have percentages of those what we need to hit, and the modalities are up to and privy to what each coach needs and what each athlete needs. Right. So there's multiple lenses that we can put on that, but Coach Miller does a great job of allowing us to do what we need to do within the parameters of UCLA football specific performance. Understanding that, I like to use a lot of special exercises. So a lot of special exercises I do, whether they're for hip flexors or tib raises with the mechanism or gripping things, behind the neck lat pull downs, different attachments and things. Some people might think it's exotic, but there's specific purposes for it. A lot of the slant boards when we're doing some of the more plyometric hops and single leg stuff to get into the ankle as well. There's a lot of things going on. Like we changed out we have our kabuki trap bars, open trap bars, when we're doing block pulls with those, and we changed that recently to a split stance high pull. So high hang or low hang, I give them the option. Uh, High pull with our split stance. The others are behind the neck. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff we do, it might look different or exotic, but contextually driven is number one. So the results speak for themselves, and yeah, those are the hops with the ankles and just getting into different shapes and positions. And that's a lot of our off season stuff. But I got a lot of comments or questions about the high pulls and some of the different exercises that we use because we're not used to seeing stuff. And hey, like I want to use that with my guys. Like, what are you doing with that? And it's kind of specific to us, right? And like, yeah,
Mhm.
like maybe that's more as an idea with you. But a lot of it was like, hey, like we're doing a split stance high pull because I eventually in the future want to do split cleans with them because I think that's very important as well. And split cleans where they would start from a bilateral position, and let's say they start with the left leg forward, right leg back. When they split, they'll do a split clean, power clean, right? They'll split stance, the left foot's in front, and as soon as they catch that, they're going to go into a split jerk, and their switch feet where their right foot will end up being in front of the left foot will be behind. So that dynamic movement, when we hook it up to the gym wear and the VBT, should be pretty violent. and really help with the kinetic chain. And a lot of it, transfer of power from the feet into the upper body, or the feet just into a rotational aspect. And I think we touched on that last time, where there's a difference between
Hmm.
turning and rotating. And a lot of the stuff that we see
Yeah.
as rotational based training is really just hips and shoulders are turning together, as opposed to hips go and then the shoulders go. So again, going back to that a little bit, like maybe we just need some ground contact time, or we need some
Mm.
force into the ground with load. And if I can get the guys to use 155 pounds, or somewhere around like 80 kilos, to drive their left foot into the ground before the right foot swings, and I can kind of simulate that, and not being too specific. I'm not trying to get sport specific, position specific with actual loaded movements, and some of the Franz Bosch waterback stuff that we use as well, getting into the QL, and just, perturbations, things like that. So there's a lot going on, right? I like the Lewis Simmons idea of 20% barbell, specific
Mm.
movements or derivatives of those movements, and then 80% special exercises, because it seems to work really, really well for our
I
guys.
think that's it's something we also spoke about the last time we recorded. It's like I can disagree with a coach on something, but I'll never want to tell them that they're wrong, because again, you've touched on it just now, and it's like, a, you don't know what athletes they have. It's program specific. You don't know the playing style. You don't know mentorships. You don't know experiences. So like I I have a big issue when coaches start attacking other coaches based on their program. Now, if they're putting athletes at risk, then talk about the coach, but not the athlete. Like it's not the athlete that should be put on blast for it.
Yeah,
But it's again, I love this job because I get to see how different programs have evolved and sort of been influenced by um different experiences. And I think we also spoke in depth about the split cleans, and you kind of went a little bit more into the specifics as why. So if you don't mind, I kind of want you to dive into that a little bit more, and the
yeah,
usage and what you've sort of taken away from it.
yeah. A lot of the usage is just like variance, and not for the sake of novelty, but for the sake of ensuring that the guys are athletic and they have rhythm and they understand how to move with load, and they can ballistically have awareness of their surroundings, or external load as well. So, um, with the special exercises, it's funny, especially with the split cleans. A lot of people just, oh, it's just a clean, and then you kind of have to put one foot in front and one foot back, and that's pretty much it. And then you reset. But we're still looking for violent hip extension. We're still looking for triple extension before they get into that split position with their feet. Um, and a lot of it, again, is we might translate that to overhead, depending on the percentage that we might drop and the speed. We always want the meters per second to dictate the load. But if we can, depending on where we're at, and again, movement dependent and mean velocity dependent, if we can kind of get a percentage range of where they should be, that's super helpful. But again, the speed's always going to dictate where we're at. So one of the things that's important too is like all the stuff that we do, like even the AEL jumps, like the accentuated eccentric lowering jumps with the chains, because I don't like dumbbells rolling around or kettlebells being weird on the jump mat. Um, when we go heavy with our loads,
Mm.
with our barbell stuff, we'll do heavier um, chain loads on those, and then we'll drop them down. If each chain is about 18 to 20 pounds, we'll start out with 3 chains, and then if we go lighter one day, it'll be 2 chains, and if we go moderate, um, we'll mix in and dabble in between. So, in it's funny too. Like I like to post a lot of stuff and I get questions, or I get different things, and people will steal the exercise and bastardize it in a certain way, and um, I like to give credit where credit due, and I don't want credit, but at a certain point, you see things, and guys are using exercises incorrectly with youth kids or with pro
Mm.
guys. I'm just like, oh, that's interesting. And um, one thing that I was joking around with is like, it's morphic resonance is morphic resonance is this term when um, and there's been studies on rats and stuff where they put them in a maze, and they eventually, this group of rats finds a cheese within this maze in New York, and then the same maze is set up in Tokyo, and the rats figure it out quicker than these rats, or they know what's going on, and then they change this and that changes, and there's some kind of morphic, there's resonance, there's connection between whatever that hive mind is. And I don't know how to explain that. They're still trying to figure that out, whatever. And that's a little bit woo woo out there, but um, in regards to that, it's funny because in 2002 there was Are you familiar with like Napster and LimeWire and the Pirate Bay?
Yeah,
Did we talk
yeah,
about this last time?
yeah. We spoke about it. I was a big fan of LimeWire.
We were all pirates back in the day, ripping and burning CDs. And when you burn a CD, it has lines, and you write on what the name of the album is and who the artist was, and they're clear cases that you can set up. And 2002, System of a Down came out with this album called Steal This Album, and I always joke and put like a little picture at the bottom, like, hey, steal this album, like steal this exercise.
Hmm.
I don't care anymore. Just do what you want to do, and it's fun. And I like seeing other people try new things, and um, it's fun, right? But going back to what kind of exercise and things I do, I might take some of those exercises and use them for myself. Um, I think a lot of the times, and this is another funny media pool. It's like, are you familiar with Star Wars? And
I've not watched it, but I will.
yeah,
I'm familiar with some of the references.
yeah. So like, I don't train like my athletes, right? I also played a different sport, but we're the same species. There's running involved, there's pulling and pushing and exertion, compression, um, and it's funny thinking about like a lot of coaches that I've heard, and they're not virtue signaling. They're just talking how they live. Is I want to make sure that the athletes know that I can do what they do, or I've done what they did, or I'll clean and I'll jerk and I'll sprint the same way that they do. And that's awesome, and I really appreciate the setup with the coaches. But I'm more of like the coach now, where it's like, man, I'm just trying to like keep some elasticity and just keep moving and keep some tissue on me. And um, going back to the Star Wars reference, it's like when Yoda's walking around with his cane, right? And then all of a sudden he pulls out a lightsaber. He's doing flips all over the damn screen, and it's like this, like, what is going on right now? It's more of that, or
Yep.
like the other guy who's like on the opposite side of the spectrum with the Force is the Darth Sidious. He apparently hates using lightsabers, so he uses like Force lightning, and he just doesn't like lightsabers at all. He just won't. He refuses to use them. He's too good for lightsabers, right? I'm not saying I'm too good for cleans and jerks and sprinting, right? But there's a certain amount of like, je ne sais quoi involved with, it is what it is, and this is how I'm training, and this is fun for me, and these are my leverages, and that's what I'm really good at. I'm really good at squatting with my heels almost touching, and deadlifting with my feet really wide apart, and I have an interesting way of setting up my hands for bench pressing, and those are things I do. And I've had a torn labrum and a dislocated collarbone, so I don't really clean that much because it's not great, and
It
my
sucks.
shoulders are
Yeah.
congenitally lax, so I don't have a stop sign when I'm snatching. But I do like moving things explosively and moving around and jumping still. So, um, it is what it is. It's fun.
Yeah, I also think it's important to train how you like to train. Like I do like to train athletically, but I will also throw in a 21 gun salute or um just go pyramid sets for biceps, triceps, like bodybuilding shit, which
Yeah,
again, it's fun. Like who doesn't want to feel that fucking jacked pump at the end
yeah.
of the workout?
RTP is a great place just to do bicep curls until your nose bleeds. Like, obviously joking, right? That's figurative, but there's a lot of different ways where the guys feel different movements based off where they're at, and they're just like, "Well, I really like that." And it's like, yeah, it's just a different way of doing the same thing. Yeah, I was. This is the other line I had from last time. Is like some people think the opposite of fire is water, and some people think the opposite of fire is not fire. We're doing the same thing. The fire's got to get out somehow. You know.
I've been having a discussion recently, and people think that strength and speed are, and this is kind of touching on your point of polar opposites. Like strength and speed are polar opposites of each other. I think they're right next to each other, but they're just expressed differently. And like what I mean by that is like there's an element of strength and speed, and there's an element of speed within strength. It's just expressed differently in the sense of obviously with your conventional strength, it's slower, but to move that speed, you still have to go through a to move that weight and that strength element is there, you still have to have some element of speed with it. I've not articulated this the best way just now, but I do think it's closer than people think and not so far removed than what is perceived.
Yeah, the strength speed curve from absolute strength to absolute speed, that middle ground of strength speed and speed strength is important of like ballistics and moving a barbell like Olympic lift, right? And based off of the outputs of power, it's important. And it's I think Charlie Francis slash Fred Duncan slash Buddy Morris um, had a quote somewhere within that realm was I've seen really strong people eventually get fast. I've seen really fast people working on speed be strong, and that's specific to the movements that they're doing, and if it's lower body power and whatnot, and how close they are with their jumps. Um, but at the end of the day, it's like you need both. Don't you need both? And don't you need like curves are meant to be surfed, and we're not surfing those. Like you can spend certain times in certain areas, um, but like absolute speed, if you do too much of it, you're gonna wreck yourself. Same thing with absolute
Strength.
strength, right?
Yeah.
And then the speed, strength, and the dosages are poisonous depending on how much time you spend with them, right? So to make sure that you're doing it correctly, there has to be balance, and there's an approach where you know it's CNS driven too, right? Because it's like
Mm.
all throughout that, like I would love to see a strength speed curve like layered with CNS and like how important that is because those are all like high CNS things if you would like to do that if you're going to vertically integrate a program or a model like yeah you can do box jumps or you can do AEL jumps or med ball throws or things of that nature and then kind of have like a pretty chill day but if you're hanging out in that moderate zone too much you're gonna you know what are you really getting out of it. Right. So
Yeah.
again, it's important. I think like going further into that or trying to dive headfirst into that, it's like, yeah, really strong people are going to do really great in football if they're closer to the ball. The guys that are further away from the ball, like our wideouts, our DBs, our safeties, things that guys in the backfield, like it's important to know like where they are in context to like the main focus, aka the
Mm.
ball, and if they're on defense or offense. So yeah, by guys that are, out there, they need to run on their tempos. They need to run a little bit longer yardage than the guys that are more interior, of course.
I think it goes back to that fill in the buckets. It does because and again, I think that so much of what we talk about as an industry, people see it as separate things, but there's always that golden ribbon that runs through all of them. Like to be a good S&C coach, you need to know biomechanics, you need to know physiology, you need to know psychology, you need to know sociology. I think, yeah, I do think the textbooks kind of ruin our perception of what the industry should look like. And then again, we talk about energy systems and ATPs and aerobic, anaerobic, and people think that as the match or game continues, they just switch off. But you're constantly tapping into them and sort of tapping into reserves, and oxygen is always ongoing, so it's always refilling and replenishing them with the stores. And again, we can talk about capacity building with you need strength to be powerful, you need power to be fast, and you need all of those to have endurance. And it's like I don't think that we should focus so much on being perfect at one. I think we need to think like encompass everything and sort of just be generalists with everything that we do.
Yeah, I think a concurrent model best suits that. Where, and we talked about the idea of using ATP. Like, do I need to understand the Krebs cycle in total? Like, do I need to understand oxidative components and stress? And I think that's important. And like, it could even go into actin and myosin and sliding filament theories and things of that nature too, where you should know that. And I think one of the when I always joke about this with I spoke at a regional in California last year. For the NSCA. It's like, why did we start the textbook with like microbiology? Like that's
Hmm.
rough. That's a rough start. Like I understand,
Hmm.
but can we get into some movement based stuff because the people who are reading this book like want to be able to coach immediately, and then we can get into some energy system stuff, and then we can break up. Like I don't think that the microbiology stuff they start with should be all together. I think it should be kind of staggered through. And um, I'm not the one who writes the book or co-authors it or whatnot. But the idea of like, hey man, like I'm going to be a strength and conditioning coach. I want to work with professional athletes. I want to work with whoever else. Gen Pop doesn't matter. All right, so this is what a cell looks like,
Yeah.
and this is what a muscle fiber looks like, and this is important. And um, I mean, even going into altitude training and things of that nature, I think it's important. But that's later in the book as well. So
Mm.
um, I'm the kind of person who, when I decided I needed to get a CSCS, um, I just read the whole book and then I started doing the stuff. So I read it like it was, a novel from, start to
Mm.
finish, as opposed to like jumping around. And when we have interns that want to get their CSCS, I have like a little model of like, okay, you want to read these chapters first because these are interesting. You want to read these chapters next, and then you want to finish with these because these are going to be the most questions. So you want to finish with those. And that wants to be like that chapter of like microbiology as well as the chapters that involve like plates are 18 inches tall, so you want, if you have windows, to be at least 20-inch minimum off the ground, right? So those components are super important. So I want to learn those last, so it's closer to the test as opposed to stuff that's not as frequently on there based off of all of the questionnaires and stuff and quizzes. So yeah, I think that's important too. It's an idea of how you're learning, what's going on, like how are you learning about learning,
Mm,
and like you said too, it's um, the concurrent model of training is going to be important, because we're training all capacities, we're training all values. I'm training speed, I'm training aerobic endurance, but we're in season, coach. But and output and stuff, we still need to get some yardage in because
mm,
you're going to need to recover, and there's multiple things that we get into, and kind of come those teeth along the lines of you know can I recover faster based off of my fitness level? Talking about speed and strength and going back to that, excerpt, it's like get on the bike and let me see what your wattage is for X amount of time. Like, are you in shape right now, or are you kind of just, coasting right now off of strength and recovering? Um, so the concurrent model is, understanding that, football is a loaded, stressor as well. There's speed involved with
mm,
that. You're wearing pads. There's external pressure from guys pushing you, and depending on the position, right? There's hands on you, hand fighting, and things of that nature as well. So I need to understand that there's a lot of strategy and technical mastery that goes into that sport. Um, Position specific, of course. That's the most important thing. And then it's maintaining strength and speed. And then it's tissue quality, maintaining, that tissue so that can potentiate strength and speed up here. Um, so within that tower, or within that model of concurrent, eventually we get into the off season where football is not as important anymore. Strength and speed are at the top. Aerobic fitness kind of gets into that tier, and we can have more of a horizontal plane of where we're actually looking at the qualities. We're never going to go into this setup where, and I mentioned Louis before, but 4 or 5 weeks of Western block training, we're focused on strength,
mm.
and 4 or 5 weeks we're working on speed, and then 4 or 5 weeks we're working on fitness. And that first block doesn't translate to that third block because it's too far removed based off of the time and the periodization based off of that. So if anything else, periodization is just a plan, and how we're actually
Yep.
executing and administering that plan is how we're attempting to provide a stimulus because we want a certain adaptation. If that adaptation is not happening, then I have to start over and backwards plan or reverse engineer where I'm starting and what's going on. So I need to change that stimulus and ensure that that adaptation is happening at the right time, at the right amount, and it's not a fire hose to the guy's face or the
Mhm.
athlete's face. So we're not getting too much something we can actually slow them down if we need to, and kind of pull the leash eventually if needed.
Yeah, last time we also spoke about reverse engineering quite a lot, and I loved your take on the exercise and progression and regression based on sort of reverse engineering quite a lot of what you do. Can you sort of break that down and explain what you mean?
Yeah, I think I went into the zone of proximal development, meaning, I know this much about strength and conditioning, or let's even get into something where a lot of the coaches say like cleans or Olympic movements are difficult to teach. So if I know this
That
amount,
was the example that we were talking about.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the ZPD, zone of proximal development. If I know this much of a pie chart about, you know, let's say the power clean, let's say, so we're let's go hang power clean and be kind of specific with that. I know it's off the ground. I know I'm not going to receive the bar in a full squat. I know I need to stand up with the front rack, right, from where we're at, right.
Mhm.
So if the athlete I'm dealing with has a smaller kind of circle within that circle of understanding, hey, power clean is the one where I'm in the front, right, and that's usually what we get in terms of feedback. It's like, yeah, and then they try and put the bar on the ground and go, oh, hold on, we're high hang, or we're gonna low hang that power clean. Okay, so they pick it up, right, and then they go into a full squat. Hey, it's a power clean, right? We're not going into a full squat. I can bridge based off of what they know, with regards to where they're at, and then where I know. So I'm gapping, I'm schema building from where they are, and that's an easier kind of pickup as opposed to a special exercise. Let's say we're doing a behind the neck, snatch grip push press, and they
Mm.
haven't snatched before, but they've done push presses. Let's say, let me rewind that a little bit. We can make it a little more complex. Behind the neck, snatch, grip, push, jerk. So you need to catch with their knees
Mhm.
bent, right? So it's like, hey, the bar's on your back. Your back is, your chest is up. The bar's on your back. You have a wide grip because it's a snatch. I've never done a snatch before, coach. Okay, let's see where your shoulders are set up. I like to do the test where I put my
Yeah.
hands behind my back, and wherever my elbows are, if I can back up a little bit, depending on how much space I have, wherever my elbows are, right here in this position there. Appreciate that. If I keep my elbow right here and I just extend my arm, that should be my grip when I rotate down of where the bar should be.
Mm,
So for me, I have ridiculously long arms. If I'm 6'2", my wingspan's like 6'5", 6'6", and maybe
shit.
more. I don't know. Like I have long arms, so I'm short torso built for rotation, which makes sense of why I was a pitcher. So
Yeah.
my pinkies are on the collar on the barbell if I'm going to be snatching and going overhead. So if I have this test of like, hey, you're here, boom, we're set up, keep your elbow right there. I mean, you can even see I have some hypermobility in that too. Turn it over. That's where we're at. The bar starts in your hip crease. We're good, right? So at least I have a starting position of like where my hand should be on the bar. Hey, remember how we do our CMJ where your hands are on your hips, you dip a little
Hmm.
bit, you come up, and then we land in that same position. That's the same thing, but now you dip, you drive, that bar is coming overhead, and you receive the bar overhead, right? And that's pretty much it. So I can use a different movement um, to understand where that's from. And then the third example of that would be using some kind of schema building or scaffolding where they don't know any movements, and I'm teaching them to like do a deadlift or let's say like a clean pull. Hey, back flat chest up is always a cue for literally everything we do, right? Unless you're lying on your back on a bench press, you want to arch right a little bit in the upper back. So back flat chest up. When we start out, the bar is on the ground. It's loaded with minimal weight. You know how Kobe Bryant or Allen Iverson or I don't know who's someone that's more age appropriate if we're Luca or LeBron, right? Let's talk about them.
Mm,
When they're tired and they're on the court, they put their hands on their shorts and they put their hands on their knees. You're gonna do the same thing except your back's gonna be flat. Pick up the bar and just stand up. Right? That's all we're doing. That's our deadlift. We'll eventually get into a shrug and then get on the balls of our feet for a clean pull. But I can get them into certain shapes based off of what they already know. So the main process of that is like, what does the athlete or um, person who's attempting to learn the new skill, complex or not, what do they already know, and how am I bridging that to
mm,
understand like where they need to be? So that reverse engineering is important in regards to just teaching in general. So one of the things that we talked about as well is like if we're teaching a clean or a snatch, I'm going to start from the finished position and have them come down. So I'll have them in a front rack position, and if they front squatted, which we like to lead into cleans before we get into those, I'll say, hey, you're going to turn your hands over, you're going to keep your knuckles down, and you're just going to ride the bar back down into the ground. Um, do that a couple of times to kind of again layer the plasticity there, and then can you reverse that, right? I always start out also with like if I'm going to start in that end position, I'll say, hey, this is what the entire movement looks like. I'll do 2 or 3 reps. I'll say, here's what it looks like from the side. You try and do that. Okay, that's awful. Stop doing that. My eyes are bleeding. Let's start from the end and go from there, right?
yeah. Um, I actually just remembered how we got into this topic, and it's coaches not teaching these Olympic movements because they're too hard to teach, and I think we were just going back and forward on that. I mean that makes it a lot easier to teach when you are getting more into those complex movements and they're not great movers just now, but you want them to get there.
Yeah, I want to qualify that. I don't think I think the Olympic movements are hard to teach. I think they're the second and third most complicated, complex movements to teach outside of running. In the weight room, they're the most
Mm,
complex. Not because the movements themselves are difficult, because the mobility can be gained to get loaded in those positions. Um, I think what's missed is the explanation that there's a touch and a feel and a nuance
hmm.
that needs to be felt multiple times over to produce a clean or a snatch that is of quality, that's polished. So understanding that you can get away with some poor cleans at low loads, at low frequencies, and kind of build those in. And that's one of the reasons too that Coach Miller and I really love, and he put this in a program where I was more hesitant to because I haven't used it in a population where a lot of the athletes already know to clean, but he was really forthcoming and shared a lot of information where it's really awesome to do a muscle clean or a muscle
Mm,
snatch and understand, hey, these are the components. I'm keeping my hip extended, at the top. I'm not, receiving the barbell in this flex position in the
yep.
hips and
Yeah.
ankles and the depth, right? Um, I'm bastardizing this, movement so that they have contrast for when they do it correctly and it's smoother. So if I can contextually
Mm,
put those together and bridge, like not wrong per se, but not optimal and more what we're looking for, then it's a lot easier for us to pick those up, right? Not getting into like a matrix or a web of too many different movements and special exercises or drop snatches or things of that nature that might have their place in certain times, or certain coaches might like to teach our populations those. But for us, it's a big component of, hey man, let's go ahead and like drill this a couple times, and let's move on. Let's touch it a few times while you're fresh. Let's move on. And then I also like doing a lot of, I mentioned this with programming. We do a buy-in, we do the actual
Yeah.
training, and we do the cash out, similar to poker. So the buy-in looking more like still lifting, and then that's where the behind the neck lat pull down comes from, or some of the different movements that are, that drive quality, that drive, let's say, activation or movement of, like, let's say like a scap along the rib cage directly with scapula depression, or trying to get into different movements qualities that they need to do before they get into the actual meat and potatoes of the percentage barbell work, right, or the derivative that we've chosen for that day. So they buy in, and they might have a little fatigue. So when we're learning those higher level skill complex movements, they'll understand, hey, like these muscles are tired, so that means I need to be able to shrug, pull. When I shrug, my elbow softens up a little bit, and then I keep my knuckles down, and I can clean, right? So hey, I'm really feeling like my mid traps, my back, my forearms are hot right now. What's going on? So yeah, you need those muscles. So we build awareness with fatigue through those.
Mm.
Neurologically, when you're tired, or neurologically when the weight feels heavier and you're a little bit taxed for that day, you can default into where you were before, understanding that like you're going to be doing reps when you're tired also, but you need to do them safely, and you need to do them, you know, more polished. And I say polished instead of clean, because I hate saying like the clean needs to be cleaner, things of that
Yeah.
nature. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And like I think if done safely, you should expose your athletes to grinding stuff out as well. And that's kind of touching on the muscle cleans or the muscle snatches, where again, if done safely, like you kind of want them to still tap into that dark side and that dark zone where they're sort of expressing maximal safely,
I mean,
but
Manny, how many
no,
times? Yeah, like how many times have you seen somebody pull a power clean that's heavy, and they get up to their neck and they pull it perfect, but then they don't get under it. They just bail out of it. It's like you got to
yeah,
learn how to strain a little bit, right? You got to get in there
yeah,
and get nasty sometimes too. A lot of this
yeah,
stuff is, that's why I joke like, I don't like optimal training because it's too perfect. Uh,
mm,
and it's too much. You need to have a little bit of a rough edge. You need to have
yeah,
them strain a little bit, and if you can create parameters and movements or exercise or practices where they can strain in a completely safe manner, where there's minimal to zero risk of injury or just weirdness going on, that's great. And one of the things we touched on last time too was like with the water bags. If you do too much of the
mm,
rotational stuff, or too much volume in any really movement with the water bags, your erectors are destroyed for a week and a half. Like you're just absolute. And if your erectors are sore, like everything is just awful, right? So it's like, why
yep,
I feel like I'm just not rotating fast? I'm just a little bit slow today, whatever. A lot of the guys are not very in touch with the erectors, even though they'll feel some low back tightness. And it's like, hey, it's because you pulled today. It's not, your back's not hurt. It's not tight. It's your erectors have been taxed. And that's what it feels like, because there's not a lot going on back there in terms of, soft tissue per se. There would be in the front with the
yeah.
app.
No, again, I love exposing hard shit to athletes. It's it just builds the grittiness of sports. Like there's going to be teams that you play and you just want it to end, but it's not ending, and you still need to fight through it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the core principles for our strength standards is no excuses. Absolutely zero excuses, right? And like, hey, I'm, a couple guys on jump mat yesterday after a hard practice, or sorry, not jump mat, the vortex rather, doing a drop jump. Hey, my back's a little bit sore. A guy got, helmet ran into my ribs, yada yada. I'm like, cool. Go ahead and weigh in on the four stack. We're gonna go ahead and do a drop jump anyway, right? It's like some of that stuff you kind of have to like the although these are young men, and although they are of age to be adults, they are young, impressionable guys, right? And what happens, and this is one of the best things I learned from Corey Miller this year and last year as well, is the athletes that you come in contact with will start to carry the traits of the strength coaches. So if you're a little more aloof or passe, or if you're a little bit of like, you know, kind of off, or you have low energy, or you're more laissez-faire with how they do things or how they complete reps, and you're not on them, you'll start
Mm,
to see a little bit of that come up. If you're detail oriented, you're on them, you have high energy, you're having a good time, you're executing everything, you're fluid and dynamic. The guys are a lot more likely to have more fun, but also get a lot out of it as well. That's positive for their performance. So if we're trying to enhance their performance, we want them to be, mean and get after it as well and have the ability to strain and have the ability to try and beat the other guy, beat the shit out of their brains, the guy next to them in a race, or lift more than them. But as soon as they're done with that, they get into the locker room and they can talk a little bit. And they're still guys that are going to go to class and they're
Mm,
going to still have fun with each other because they're family, right? So it's just brothers fighting over and over again. And we encourage competition, obviously, and we encourage toughness. Um, but they need to see that out of us as well. When they're
mhm,
feeling down and they want to cut things a little bit short, or they want to find um, an avenue of, easy because they're fatigued and tired, and we've purposely driven them there, and we're trying to agitate them a little bit, and we're trying to uh, build some, resoluteness, or we're trying to build some just overall uncanny like grit, like you mentioned. We want to make sure that, hey, man, like I'm here to help. Although I'm
mhm,
on you, and
mm.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I'm and I'm and I'm poking at you and everything. It's because we need you to be tougher, and you're already tough as it is, and you wouldn't be here if you weren't. Um, but do you think the guy across the field from you in red or whatever else color, if we're Ohio State, the pending national championships on November 15th, or we're at USC at the end of the year, or in-town rivals, you think they're going to give a shit about how tired you are right now, or how fatigued you are, or you know the shoes you're wearing are not the colors you like? Nobody really cares. There's no excuses. It's performance over preference.
Mhm.
So that's another one of our out of our 10 tenets. That's another one which is my favorite. It's performance over preference, and that includes, but it's not limited to, um, food, as well as how they're eating. Like what some guys don't like water. Guess what? You will be drinking multiple
A
ounces of
lot of
water
water.
today, and you're gonna have to. Right. That this is the way.
And I think again, you need to do hard shit in this industry. Like sports isn't easy. Like if sports were easy, everyone would fucking do it. But like especially at that level where again they're getting closer to that NFL contract, or they're they're wanting to become that next level. They need to learn this now.
Eventually they will not be athletes anymore, even if they make it to the next level. They'll have to do something. And the
Yeah.
span of football in their life is way shorter than before they played football and after. If they put a helmet on when they were 4 years old the first time, and then they, graduate college and they play for a couple years. Let's say they have an insane career and they play for 10 years. Uh, guess what? You're not gonna, you know, for the most part with where we're at, if all things go naturally and well, you're not gonna die at 30, 40, 50. You got so much more time
Mm,
after that. And if you can't, you know, be a civilian, let's say, or if you can't integrate into society or just be a normal person, you're gonna have a very difficult, hard time
mhm,
outside of it. Especially with, again, going back to all the integration that we have and all the communication of knowing where to be at what time, having a schedule. I struggled with that for a whole year after I stopped playing baseball. After I, didn't pass a physical because I understood and found out what a labrum tear was. I asked the doctor when he told me my labrum was torn, how many weeks off do I need? It's like, no, you need surgery, cat. It's like, okay, well, how long before I come back? About 12 to 14 months, and you might be throwing, 80 to 85% of what you're throwing right now, velocity wise. I'm going to go do something else. And that's how this whole spiel started for the most part. I don't want anybody to have a year of, I'm an athlete and this is what I've been doing for forever. My dad was an athlete. This is my identity. I don't want anybody to
mhm.
have a horrible experience like that for a whole year of, what am I
Yeah.
doing? What's the deal here?
I'll always give him props. Coach Ray Zingler, he put it best. Like we're building humans. We're not just building athletes. Like we need to make sure that at the end of the day, like they'll turn back in the office and turn the light off and just make sure that we instill these traits in them so that they can be functioning, well, high functioning members of society as well.
Books and ball is another one of our terms that we use, or another one of our phrases where you have to have books and you have to have your grades, or you're not playing ball, and that's how it works. And that's it's up to the university. But then to be devil's advocate, we also say that like when you're playing football, especially, there's so much time on the field and so much time, watching film, that you're a student first and an athlete second, right? And that's like our one of our big jokes of like, hey man, like this is what you signed up for. This is what you want to do. Um, let's make sure you're carrying that out, and here's how we're going to help you.
Yeah, that's funny. I like at first I didn't realize what you were doing, but then I was like, ah, okay, okay, I I get you.
That's the inside
Um,
trader of NCAA sports at this time of 2025
season.
in
Yep.
yeah in April.
One question I've got, and it's something that I kind of want to get your take on it. You mentioned hypermobility, and I've been talking a lot about. controlling end ranges and how that's important for, again, m- most if not all non-contact injuries happen at an overextension. So how important for you is it to be able to control end ranges, and how do you prime and prep your athletes to handle those end ranges?
Yeah, I think numerical values are super important in that regard to understanding how much hyperextension in what areas. Like I'm more hypermobile in my elbows and shoulders than I am in my knees and hips, even though my hips and knees are very flexible as well. Um, there's an asymmetry there as well. So getting somebody on the table, getting a goniometer, understanding what degrees of hypermobility they have, um, and then also with our suite with Vault of having a dynamometer, understanding at those ranges, like what is the strength and power of those certain shapes and angles. So if I can normalize that or create some kind of like baseline of data to understand like where they're at within those areas that are more exposed, especially with non-contact injuries. The one thing we're missing with that is like, yeah, they're lying on their back and they're producing force in certain different angles, um, and there's no speed involved. There's they're going at 0 miles an hour, 0 kilometers an hour, right? So velocity is nothing. So understanding that is contextually driven to say, I understand that I have these values and these outputs and this statistical balance of where I'm at. Can I test those eventually down the road and find if I have more stability or just more force or more? I don't want to say absorbing a force because I'm producing force, right? And even if I'm doing like a depth jump, but understanding, hey, like, can I manipulate that in a way, or do I need to get some kind of external help, like a knee brace for alignment,
Mm,
right? Spatted ankles and taping of ankles. So there's a lot of like equipment that can also help with that as well. But understanding where they're at, and especially with guys that are more injury prone, let's say, or run into more injuries based off of um, how much action they get as well. It's like, can I understand that? Like, yeah, I'm um, hyperextension 5 after an ACLR, let's say, um, and I have this amount of strength in that area. The quad growth is this side, asymmetry compared to that side. That side is 20% stronger. I should be able to do X amount of things or these qualities based off of where I'm at. Um, that helps us drive a guy who's already injured, but I should already have those numbers and put a guy on the table. Our athletic trainers are tremendous with that, where we measure everyone as part of the physical. We have a whole suite of things that we do and to ensure that we have, an understanding of where they're at and what's normal, what's abnormal. Um, so understanding that is also important for like non-contact injuries are difficult because it's,
hmm
there's
Non
some
contact.
mystery and some, right. Um, if a guy, like we had a guy get ran into last year who broke his humerus, and at Washington, yeah, it was a tough one. They had to ride the plane back. It was horrible. I really feel for that guy. But it's one of those things where like wrong place, wrong time, and you just get a bullet ran through you basically of a guy running 19 and change miles an hour like right into your arm, and another guy's coming from another side, and we've seen all kinds of catastrophic injuries as well. But um, with the non-contact stuff, like everyone has an idea of what they think is like the right answer for it when it's again like I'm more nihilistic. Like it might be what you think it is, and the biggest predictor of injury is prior injury. But if a guy is, when I've seen guys that just are built so weird and their knees touch and they're in the inside edges of their feet on their arches, but then they start to rotate and move and go laterally, and they look beautiful and amazing. Like you think
Mm,
looking at this guy who's 6'7", runs 19 miles an hour, is 300 pounds, you would think this guy's going to get injured. He's just going to get
yep.
absolutely destroyed. And then you see him move, and it's like, oh, these are actually good shapes, right?
Yep.
So the
It's like
difference,
the example of LeBron James's feet.
yeah, yeah. Not to say
Like
we're looking at
more,
overnight feet, but those are crazy. And just like
yeah.
the kids wearing awesome shoes, and the thing that is also kind of curled over and not looked at is somebody who's standing. We're not in an analytical position, but how they stand based off of how they move is going to be contextually different based off of what side they're at or which way they lean. And if they play multiple positions, usually those people are pretty good bilaterally, right? Because
Mm,
they're used to using both sides. And there's offset stuff with medicine ball and more ballistic stuff going back to that strength speed curve of where they're at with speed strength. But no, you're totally right. It's like the feet, show what's going on. And I mean, all the GOTA stuff is interesting and going into like the dynamic neural stabilization of like the frog school and looking at like what babies do. But babies don't have kneecaps, so I mean, like, yeah, they're gonna squat great, whatever.
Yep.
That's not shade,
It's
like, it's true.
and I think, I mean, I personally believe that everyone should be able to do those primal movements though, like some neck rolls, some rolls,
Mhm.
backwards, forwards. The Again, not everyone's going to be able to get into that deep squat position. They should, but I mean, if you've got like a 300 to 400 pound guy, chances are he can't get his legs wide enough to actually sink.
Yeah, I've sacrificed hundreds of pounds on a back squat PR within our position group because I'm having them squat, you know, below depth, below hip crease with their kneecap. Sorry, kneecap above hip crease. I'm getting them into not terminal ranges, but pretty damn low, like acid grass for the most part. In their squats, and they're squatting between 315 355 pounds with our guys, including our snappers. And the comments go, "Why I've squatted 450 pounds before. I squatted, almost
Mm.
500 pounds before for like 2 reps, 3 reps. How come I'm getting weak? No, you're getting stronger in different ranges. This is a completely different movement, right? So,
Yep.
um, not that I'm, the squat, all the way down to the ground every time for forever. But if we're going to be testing something, I want to make sure that we have at least a standard of, terminal ranges, whether that's flexion or
Mhm.
extension, to load it
Yep.
up, right?
I mean, strength in all ranges is important too. Like, if we're talking about posterior and hamstring injuries, looking at the hamstrings as sort of having that two insertion points. So, like, knee dominant movement, like at the very bottom, and then dom movement at the very top. Like, having strength throughout that whole muscle, that's going to prevent a lot.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
again, it's like surfing that concentric, eccentric, isometrics, sort of really surfing those demands is quite key too.
yeah, I don't think I have a sheet close to me of like this week of our training that I showed last time. Um, but I'll have an SL or an LL on different movements, and the LL is long lever, short lever, and especially with the hamstring, which
Mhm.
is biarticulate, like you mentioned, it's important to make sure like a lot of the movements from our Nordic, the knees in full flexion, and it goes into extension, and the hips are extended the whole time. Right, that's great. But there's other movements where the hip is in full extension, and sorry, the knee is in full extension, and then I can, flex and extend the hip, a la some kind of just normal hinging, whether that's single leg or bilateral. So it's context driven and dependent on, and I feel like I
Mm.
say context probably like if you take a shot every time I say context, you're going to be absolutely on the floor sprawled, right? So like
But
the other,
but then saying that, right, and you touched on it before, like everything depends. Like it really does depend. Like it depends is your best friend in this industry, because like not every athlete is going to need to do one thing the exact same way. Like not all athletes are going to need it. Some will need a bit more than others, but like it's
like
context driven.
I can say, and this is an absolutist conjecture, right? I can say that if you do deadlifts with a rounded back, a rounded lumbar spine, and you use a twisting motion, you will get hurt if you do deadlifts in that. Like that's an absolute statement. So in terms of injury, there are absolute statements that I think are true. When it comes to enhancing performance, I don't think that you know being an absolutist is you know driven
Mm.
in the correct lane. Where it's like if you want to get stronger, you should squat this way. I'm not skinning cats, but apparently I've heard there's like multiple ways of doing that. And to whatever ends there are, it's like let's consider a pitch shark, a single leg squat, and RFE. There's so many ways to do things, and I also mentioned in terms of like hot takes, like planes. I'm not really into like cardinal planes because I think
Mhm.
there's torsion in different movements. Even if there's a sagittal movement like a sprinting going forward, there's rotation at the arms, right, and in the shoulders and the hips, as well in the spine. And there's different movements there, and that locomotion is important to understand. Like, hey, this movement is sagittal, but like even on a deadlift, like I need to create some kind of torque in the shoulders to
Mhm.
pack the lats, and um, even my grip with my hands. Like if I turn my hand over for a mixed grip, there's external rotation in there. There's rotation and torsion and different things, and I think it's easier for PTs, right, to say like, hey, this is transverse and this is sagittal and this is moving in these cardinal planes or oblique and whatnot. So I think that's important just for like textbooks and understanding. But when it comes to actual practice of things, like I've seen people in weird shapes jump up
Mm.
against the wall and land, or guys, edge rushers get around linemen in really nasty, weird, low shapes and be totally fine. And like that wasn't a very transverse movement. That wasn't very transverse of you, now was it? Like you're just moving for the sake of moving, right? So being
Mhm.
able to identify and categorize is important, I think, but understanding that you must have these movements, I don't think is as important if you're already using global movement patterns that are, like you said, either primal or just touching a lot of those bases,
Mhm.
checking all those boxes.
It's something I've touched on in a previous episode, and I mean, sports aren't linear. Sports aren't like
I
you're
mean,
not just moving.
not even chess is linear because the horses move backwards.
So being exposing your athletes to diagonals and sort of all different shapes and sizes, like I think that's it's important to like the best example is Pat as what's his name? Yeah, Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes.
And um, just some of the positions that his coach. Now, say what you will about the coach. I know people have mixed feelings on him, but what he does well is expose him to weird movements that he genuinely does get into during the game, and he still darts that fucking ball.
Yeah, he's not only a good mover, but just aware and observant of his environment, right? And he orient orientates himself correctly in
Yeah.
order to like. It's crazy how quickly like his reactions are. But I mean, there was a video of him. And this is again joking, like morphic resonance. Like, there's no way this guy saw us as a baseball team doing um, back bends and stuff off of a wall, going backwards and arching, and then like literally like 2 days later, like there's a video of his guy doing you know, his trainer making him do that kind of stuff too, and he's getting in these really deep postures and really great, awesome ranges. It's like that's more of a resonance. There's no way he's looking at my stuff. But the other side is like, okay, well, is that an affirmation that I'm kind of doing things, at a decent clip here? Um, no, I think the idea of those ranges, those movements are just exploring like creativity as well, where
Hmm.
it's like if someone's in a system where it's more rigid. It's more, this is the way it is done. This is how you do this. You can get away with that Olympic lifting, I think, because three movements, and two of them are within one attempt. So considering that, and like the idea of like chaos is hyper important,
Hmm.
and I think that's where we slipped as a profession, whether it's private or within each professional sector, is like guys on Bosu balls upside down holding chains, throwing um, dog toys at each other. It is similar to dog training where what the idea is. It's not really agility. I guess it's change direction. You know where the cones are. There might be a reaction at the end, but a lot of it stuff is like choreography. It's all like
Hmm.
premeditated stuff. Um, do I think that stuff is like fun and like cool? I throw a helo stick at you and I say red and you catch the red one and that's cool, right?
Yeah.
Um, that coming from the guy who had our TVs set up, and we had different videos of balls moving around, and the guys would track the balls of eyes. And one of the main things we were doing with that component, which was kind of inspired by a video of like Cal Dietz holding on to an owl, I think, and moving around, and the head stays still,
Hmm.
even though he's moving. Um, if you're looking at something that's moving on a screen, right, and we had them go closer or back up, we had it faster, and they would do this in between their sets of like power movements. Like they might do
Hmm.
um, a speed deadlift with bands or chains, and then go to the woodway and sprint. And then while they were resting within that 35 to 40 seconds, they would have some kind of
Like a cognitive drill.
a cognitive constraint drill, right? Because I wasn't like a fan of blaze pods because of how many people we had per
Hmm.
group. We would have them turn to this side or that side and look and closer, and we would change and adapt things differently too. Um, but we found like if guys are closing one eye and keeping one eye open, like this eye closes a little bit too, so we just cover the eye stays open. And when
Hmm.
I'm hitting or doing things, even if I'm looking over there, like a batter would be hitting, both eyes are open the same way, even though this eye is more dominant because it's facing where the ball is coming from. Or if I'm running down the field this way, if I'm quarterback and I want to throw the ball, my eye on this side is dominant because of where I'm at. I can still turn and look, but this is my more dominant eye. And I might be running across the field this way and throw off my back shoulder, which again, these are not things that you teach. These are not things that
Hmm.
you get into on purpose and you practice and just kind of just moving around and just kind of joking around. And there's a lot of really good trainers like geez, what's the guy's name? I gotta look it up. It's like Josh or something like that, where he has guys jumping over hurdles and different things like that. And it's like, dang, it's really good. It's just like movement, like capacity stuff that I really
Hmm.
like, and it's just exploring different ranges and exploring um, like more of what it's like to be in areas of chaos, which is what sport is. It's chaos with rules, and chaos with. with certain standards that they want to get into in terms of winning or losing. I think that's
100%.
that's one of the other things. I think when people make fun of the WNBA and they show like a bunch of like layups and stuff that are missed and things like that, and not to get political or anything else, but like sometimes like we get into weird movements and we haven't practiced that shot before, so I have to kind of put that shot up, or there's like a time restriction or things of that nature. And I've seen just as bad plays in the NBA, if not worse, right?
I mean, I think that's what's so tricky about social media and the ability to just clip anything. If you actually watch an NBA game, they miss a lot too.
A huge amount. I think one of the other things that we get kind of involved with regard to issues is the idea of like the picture of triple extension of a defensive player running into a guy that's running, or running into a quarterback and he's destroying this guy. He's triple extended. His toes are barely on the ground. He's at toe off. His arms are wrapped around the guy, and like this is what a power clean or a snatch looks like. Last time I checked, you weren't sprinting into a power clean or a
Hmm.
snatch, at a diagonal
Yeah,
level or whatever. But the idea of violent hip extension, getting onto the toes, having some strain, having, malintent, I think those are super important qualities that you can learn from the power clean. But I think that's saying, hey, this is the same shape as that shape. Therefore, one for one, I think that conflation is really dangerous as well. Because again,
yeah.
unless you sprint up to the bar and pull it off the ground, which sounds, heinous.
I know a coach who would try that.
Try it. Try it.
I most definitely will not, but I know a coach who would. No, I appreciate you so much for coming back on and sort of spending another hour and some change with me.
Nice.
Um, if you let everyone know where they can sort of get in contact with you and ask some questions if they've got any after the podcast.
I think it's Austin Josham that I was mentioning before.
Okay.
JOCHUM that I was talking about, that has like a lot of the movement stuff that I really like. He's out there, but that's I wanted to reference that before I got away from it. And the other thing that I forgot a second time was when we do the voodoo bands, we're always wrapping proximally on that limb
Hmm.
for the blood flow, as opposed to distally based off where we are within that limb. But you can find me at Coach Sweat, super simple, COACH. Sweat is spelled SWET, right? There's no A in there. Um, and I typically am on Instagram only. The only other thing I would use is probably text message or whatever. But I'm not really on Twitter. I have a Twitter, but it's more to look at like high school
I'm
games
the
when I
exact
was a
same.
coach. So just to make sure we're doing well at home. So yeah, if I'm an open book. I've had people message me and we go on phone calls and we just chop shop and uh, talk a lot. And depending on the time where we are in the season, interns calling back from different places too. So feel free to hit me up on that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you so much.
Of course,
Um,
of course. I'm glad we
peace.
reconnected and figured this out.
I know. It's
Yeah,
again, we kind of, if I'm being honest, it was the audio was messed up, and I've mentioned this to you, but
of course.
I don't want to put something out that's not true reflection of what was discussed, and if I'm having to cut huge amounts off to save a video, I would rather just not post it and get the coach back in to sort of do what we just did.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's your art at the end of the day. If you want to be reductionist about it, it's like this is an art for you and this is fun. And I know you've mentioned that you selfishly get to talk to coaches, right? But you also have to publish this and put it out so that other coaches can, you know,
Can take the
uh,
good nuggets. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So no, man, I
No,
appreciate you. Thank you so much.
peace.